today on humility. And when I told my husband that I was going to be sharing on humility, he laughed. And then I laughed because humility has not always been a forte. And I would say currently it's probably not a forte either. So this devotional was as much as for myself as it is for others. So when I think of humility, I think of the words humble, I think of the words humiliation. And so I just want to define what humility means. And so Webster defines humility as freedom from pride or arrogance, the quality or state of being humble. And then just for fun, I looked up the definition on the Urban Dictionary, and it defines humility as true humility is to recognize your value and others' value while looking up. It is to see that there is far greater than ourself into who we can become, who others can become, and how much more we can do and be. I'm going to come back to that in a second. So when I think about humility in relation to Jesus, I think about his humble beginning. I think about him being born in a barn, and maybe that's even an overstatement. His parents were regular. He was normal-ish, aside from those cool miracles that he did. He hung around with the B-teamers. Like, he was not with the royalty. You know, he didn't hang out with royalty. He was with everyday people. His approach to those people was gentle. It was meek. It was humble. He didn't beat people down with his truth. Although he did speak truth, he was not afraid to have those hard conversations. And I think about the woman at the well, and I think about how personal her issues were that he called her out on. And I think that he must have done that with such an immense amount of love and compassion, because she was able to receive what he was saying and then turn and go tell others about him. You know, it was such a life-changing moment for her that love and compassion overpowered any shame or embarrassment, and it let her be vulnerable. I think that's so cool. When I think about humility and I think about his death, you know, the death that he suffered was the most violent, humiliating, public way to die. I mean, crucifixion, any way to die. I guess anytime you're killed, I've not been killed, but that's horrible. But I think that public execution and the pain that he endured is probably the most humiliating of deaths. Yet even on the cross, he was extending that humility, his love, his grace, his compassion, his invitation that even in that moment to his accusers, to his murderers, and to the criminals that deserved to be there, he extended humility and thinking of others before himself and saying, like, there's a place for you in heaven. You know, I just think even in his death, and then I think about myself. If I'm really honest, I have to think about the moments I've had where I've put others first, and I've had to think about my motivation for that and the execution of me practicing humility. And if I'm honest, again, there have been times in my life where I've given not only myself a pat on the back, but I've broadcasted that on Facebook, you know, to show others how good or how thoughtful I was being. That is not quite the humility that I see Jesus modeling for me, right? And when I think about recent events in my life where persecuted is way too strong and over dramatic of a word, but when I think about times in my life where things weren't fair or right or just, and I've really felt wronged, I wish I could tell you that I prayed for my enemies, and I did pray for them, but I wasn't praying for blessings. I wasn't praying that way. I was I was praying for the justice and, God come down on them and show them they're wrong and the wrath, So I haven't quite lived out that humility that Christ showed in his birth, his life, or his death. So I want to read something to you from Philippians. In the book of Philippians, Paul was writing to the church in Philippi, who he had a great relationship with. And Paul was writing, it is believed that he was arrested on house arrest in Rome when he wrote this. But he was writing to believers. And he said in Philippians 2:3-4, "Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, Value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interest, but each of you to the interest of others. So when I go back to the Urban Dictionary's definition of humility, it says is to recognize your value and the values of others while looking up. I feel like that looking up to me is looking up to Jesus. It's seeing that humility has so much less to do with me, with my problems, with my deeds even. Humility has to do with me seeing myself as who God created me to be and recognizing that I can be so much more when I align my ways and myself with his ways. He wants me to live into a life where I love so much like him that my natural reaction is to put others first. My natural reaction is to want the best for everyone, even my enemies, to be servant-hearted without having to get the pat on the back, without having to broadcast it on social media, to truly pray for my enemies that God would bless them without selfish ambition, without vain conceit. And that truly does sound freeing when I think about that. So in this season of Lent, when we're focusing on who Christ is, how he lived and how he died, my prayer for you and for myself, as I said earlier, is that we could truly be able to live into the humility of Christ, to live into who he says we are, and to be who he sees us to be. So as you go throughout today or tomorrow, I want you to think about the action that we can put behind humility. And maybe that action is helping somebody that you know is really struggling in whatever way that means. Maybe it's a kind word, maybe it's a listening ear, maybe it's sitting down to a cup of coffee. Maybe it's offering an apology that is long overdue. Maybe it's giving your time and talents in a different way. I don't know what it is for you, and really I don't know what it is for me, and I'm going to pray that God would continue to show how I can live into his humility on a daily basis to be more like him.